All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So I want to start us off today with a question for you.
Oh, okay. Lay it on me.
It's a really, really simple one. When was the last time you actually, stopped and looked at a footprint?
A footprint.
Yeah, and I don't mean a metaphorical one, like a carbon footprint or anything like that. I mean a literal, actual footprint in the mud or,
Yeah.
in the sand.
Right. On the beach or a hiking trail. Yeah.
Exactly. And you look down, you see the shape. Maybe it's a boot print, maybe it's a sneaker, and you know something instantly, don't you?
You do. It's almost precognitive. You don't even really think about it. You see the trace, and you immediately know the cost.
You know someone was there. You don't think, oh, the wind must have blown the dirt into that specific shape.
No, of course not. Or that it's some kind of, bizarre geological anomaly.
Oh, instinctively, you know a person walked by. And that very simple, almost childish intuition is actually the launch pad for our entire discussion today.
It's a powerful starting point.
It is, because we are tackling, and I don't say this lightly, the biggest subject there is. We're not talking about the economy or AI or the latest geopolitical shift.
No, this is the question that sits at the bottom of the entire stack.
We're talking about the origin of everything. The universe, the stars, the microscopic machinery humming away inside your cells right this second, and the intelligence that may or may not be behind it all.
Why is there something rather than nothing?
Yeah.
And, if we accept that there's a source, then what is the nature of that source? That's the real deep dive.
Right. And typically when you listen to discussions about this, it kind of goes one of two ways. It's either super dense, impenetrable philosophy full of jargon, like, the unmoved mover, or ontological arguments.
Things that make your eyes glaze over unless you have a PhD in it.
Exactly. Or it goes the other way, and it's purely emotional, purely based on feeling. But today, we are grounding this entire conversation in a very specific text that takes a really different approach.
Which is what makes it so perfect for what we do here.
It is. We are diving into a study titled, Get to Know the Creator, Glory Be to Him. In the original Arabic, it's Taraf ala Al-Khaliq Jalla wa ala. It's a work by Mahmoud Hussein Awad, published by Tabsir back in 2020.
And what makes Awad's work so fascinating, and I think so useful, is that he manages to bridge two worlds that often sit at completely separate tables in our modern discourse.
How so?
Well, he combines logical, rational observation, literally just looking at the physical world around us, with a deep linguistic analysis. He isn't just saying, you should believe this. He's saying, look at this, and then now look very closely at the specific words we use to describe this.
And that's the part that really hooked me. The premise isn't about blind faith. The whole mission of this deep dive, following the book's lead, is to answer a very specific question. How does one recognize the creator?
And that word choice is so important. Taraf.
Right. Explain that. It's not just know in an abstract sense.
No, it implies becoming familiar with, getting acquainted with. It's not just suspecting some force exists out there. It's about identifying specific attributes, almost like getting to know a person.
Okay, so the text proposes two main avenues for this getting acquainted.
Exactly. The first is what we can call the logical and observational path. That's looking at these signs, as the book calls them, in the natural world. Everything from cosmology down to the nitty-gritty of biology.
Looking at the evidence.
Looking at the evidence. And the second avenue is the linguistic and scriptural path. And this is where we get into analyzing the very specific Arabic names for the creator, primarily Al-Khaliq and Al-Khaliq.
And I just want to flag that second part for you right now because you need to stick around for the linguistics, I promise. I thought I knew what the word creator meant. It seems obvious, right? The one who makes things.
Well,
seems straightforward.
But the distinction the text draws between Al-Khaliq and Al-Khaliq, I mean, it was a total paradigm shift for me. It genuinely changed how I view the passage of time itself. It absolutely does. It shifts your entire worldview from something static like, okay, God made the world a long, long time ago, to a reality that is incredibly dynamic and happening right now. But we'll get there.
We will. But before we get to the grammar and the stars, we actually have to start on the ground. We have to talk about camels.
We absolutely have to talk about the camels.
Because apparently, according to this text, one of the most profound and enduring arguments for intelligent design doesn't come from a theoretical physicist with a wall of chalkboards.
No, not at all. It comes from a Bedouin nomad standing in the middle of the desert.
This is the Bedouin's logic, right?
It is. It's a classic anecdote you find in a lot of theological literature, and Awad uses it to set the entire stage because it strips away all the academic noise and gets right to the heart of the matter.
So paint the picture for us. Who is this person?
Okay, so imagine a Bedouin, a nomad, someone whose entire existence is tied to the desert. There are no distractions, no smartphone buzzing, no library to go consult. This person's survival depends, minute by minute, on their ability to read their environment. You have to observe the wind, the shape of the dunes, the position of the stars. Their powers of observation are not a hobby. They're a lifeline.
So this person is the ultimate empiricist, in a way. They have to deal in facts. If they hallucinate an oasis, they die.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And so, in this famous account, this Bedouin is asked a question that has, frankly, stumped philosophers for centuries. The question is, what is the evidence for the existence of a creator?
Wow, talk about being put on the spot. Prove God exists, go.
I think most of us would probably just start stuttering about the Big Bang or the laws of thermodynamics or something.
Right. But this man, he lives in a world of raw, unfiltered causality. He doesn't need a textbook. His answer is incredibly simple and immediate. He just says, the dung indicates the camel, and the footprint indicates the walking. The dung indicates the camel. It is so earthy. It's blunt. It is definitely not the answer you expect in a high-minded theological debate.
It isn't, but just look at the raw power of the logic. It is pure cause and effect, he's saying. If I am walking in the desert and I see camel droppings on the sand, I know with 100% certainty that a camel passed by here.
Right, you don't need to see the camel itself.
The camel could be 10 miles away by now. But the trace proves the actor. The evidence proves the existence of the one who left it.
And the second part, the footprint indicates the walking. That's the intuitive leap we were just talking about. You see the print, you know the walker exists, you just don't assume the sand happened to fall that way.
It's the foundational logic of trace and cause. Every single effect must have a cause. It's one of the most basic rules of reality. If you walk into your kitchen and there's a broken vase on the floor, you know something caused it to break. A cat, a breeze, a person.
You don't assume the vase just spontaneously decided to explode.
Never. So the Bedouin is essentially asking, why on earth would we assume the entire universe is the one great exception to this fundamental rule?
And this is the part I really love, he takes this incredibly simple, grounded logic, the logic of the sand at its feet, and he looks up, he applies it to everything.
He extrapolates, and the text quotes his extension of the argument. He says, so a sky with constellations Barouge, and an earth with pathways, and seas with waves, do these not indicate the existence of the all-hearing, all-seeing?
That's the jump. From sand to sky, from the micro to the macro.
And just look at the specific details he picks out. He doesn't just say the sky. He says a sky with Barouge, with constellations. These are massive, ordered, predictable structures in the heavens.
They're not just a random spray of dots.
Not at all. And he mentions an earth with pathways, which implies geography, valleys, mountain passes, features that allow for travel and life. He mentions seas with waves, implying the whole system of tides, the lunar cycle, the rhythm of the ocean.
So what he's saying is, if a simple, messy footprint in the sand requires a walker to explain it,
then a massive, coordinated, finely tuned system, like our solar system or the planet's ocean tides, definitely requires a designer to explain it.
it's an argument from scale and complexity. If the small, simple thing requires intelligence to explain its presence, then the infinitely larger and more complex thing requires an infinitely greater intelligence.
And the text really emphasizes that this isn't presented as blind faith. It's framed as a rational conclusion based on the evidence available to your senses.
That's a really important distinction the author makes. The text is not asking you to ignore your eyes and your brain. It's asking you to use them, to trust your most basic intuitions about cause and effect.
So it's a validation of that gut feeling. We sometimes think that to find truth, we need some complex mathematical proof or a philosophical treatise. But the text here is arguing that the proof is visual. It's all around you. You are literally living inside the proof.
You're breathing it.
But, okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because that's my job. The classic counter-argument to the Bedouin's logic is, well, randomness. The chance argument.
Right. Given enough time, anything can happen. A skeptic might listen to this and say, sure, it looks designed, but the universe is 13.8 billion years old. Maybe it's all just a happy accident, a lucky cosmic roll of the dice.
This is the infinite monkey theorem, essentially. The idea that if you give a monkey a typewriter and an infinite amount of time, it will eventually, by pure chance, type out the complete works of Shakespeare.
Exactly. So does Awad's text address that possibility? The possibility of coincidence?
Oh, it does, very, very directly. And this brings us to the next major section of the source material. what we can call the argument from complexity, which is essentially a refutation of randomness or coincidence.
And this is where we get the fantastic analogy of the exploding printing press. I thought this was just brilliant.
It's such a vivid and effective image. The text asks you to imagine a printing press.
Oh.
Or, to make it even easier to visualize, let's say it's an old-school typesetting shop. You have a room, and it's just filled with millions of tiny little metal letters, lead type.
Okay. I'm picturing a sea of alphabet soup, basically.
A sea of alphabet soup. Perfect. Now, imagine someone lights a stick of dynamite and throws it into the middle of that room. Boom! An explosion. The letters are sent flying everywhere. They're spinning in the air, bouncing off the walls, mixing with dust and debris and shattered wood. Total, absolute chaos.
Entropy at its finest. Maximum disorder.
Exactly. Now, imagine you wait for the dust to settle, and you walk into that ruined shop. You look down at the floor, and those millions of chaotically flying letters have somehow fallen in such a way that they have formed a perfectly bound, coherent, multi-volume encyclopedia.
Wait, not just a word. Or a sentence.
A complete encyclopedia with cross-references, correct grammar, complex scientific data, poetry, historical accounts. The page numbers are all in the correct sequence. There are no typos.
Okay, no. That's impossible. Utterly impossible.
The text then asks, would any rational mind accept that? If someone stood there and told you, oh, nobody wrote this encyclopedia, the explosion just arranged the letters perfectly by pure chance, what would you say to them?
I'd say they were delusional. Or they were trying to sell me something.
Yeah.
I would never, ever believe that.
Right. You would reject it out of hand because the probability is so infinitesimally low that it is, for all practical purposes, zero. And this is where the text applies the analogy to the universe. Awad argues that the universe is infinitely more complex than any encyclopedia. A book is just, 26 letters arranged in clever patterns? The universe is composed of dozens of subatomic particles, fundamental physical constants, complex biological codes, gravitational forces, all of it balanced on an absolute razor's edge.
So the argument is, if we can't logically accept that a simple book came from a random explosion, then it is an even greater leap of rationality to accept that the entire cosmos, with all its laws and life, came from a random accident.
That is the absolute core of the argument from complexity. It's about logical consistency. You cannot use one set of rules for a book and a completely different, contradictory set of rules for the universe. If overwhelming complexity implies design in a book, it must also imply design in the cosmos.
The text actually goes a step further, though. It doesn't just stop with the analogy. It breaks down the very logic of existence itself into a kind of trilemma. I found this part to be incredibly rigorous. It references a passage from the Quran, from Surah At-Tur, and it presents 3 and only 3 logical possibilities for how we all got here.
Yes, this is a very famous logical breakdown in theology and philosophy because it forces the mind to categorize the options. It's very clean. It says essentially, look, you exist as an undeniable empirical fact. You are here. So how did you get here? There are only 3 possible doors.
Okay, so let's walk through those 3 doors one by one. What is possibility number 1?
Possibility number 1. You were created from nothing, without a creator.
Okay, so strictly speaking, this is spontaneous generation from an absolute void. Poof.
And the text dismisses this as logically impossible. In philosophy and in physics, nothingness. The Arabic is al-adam, has no properties. It has no potential. It is the absolute absence of things. 0 plus 0 is always 0. You cannot get an effect without a cause. Nothing cannot produce something.
Right. The universe can't be its own mother, so to speak.
In a way, yes. So that first door is locked. Logically incoherent.
Okay, door number 1 is locked. What's behind door number 2?
Possibility number 2. You created yourself.
This one always hurts my brain a little bit. It sounds like a bad time travel movie plot.
It's a complete paradox.
Yeah.
Just think it through for a second. In order for you to create yourself, you would have to exist before you existed.
Right.
You would have to be present to do the work of creating, but the thing you're creating is your own existence.
So I have to exist to make myself, but I don't exist yet, so I can't possibly make myself. It's a closed loop.
It's perfectly circular logic. It's like trying to lift yourself into the air by pulling up on your own shoelaces. It is a physical, a logical impossibility. A thing cannot be both the cause and the effect of itself at the same time and in the same sense.
Okay. So if possibility 1 created from nothing is logically impossible, and possibility 2 we created ourselves is a paradox, then logic funnels us down a very narrow path. There's only one door left open.
Possibility number 3. You were created by a creator.
And the text presents this not as a religious belief you have to adopt on faith, but as the inevitable logical conclusion you arrive at through a process of elimination.
Correct. It's the old Sherlock Holmes principle, right? When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. The argument in the book is that recognizing a creator isn't a leap of faith into the dark. It's the necessary landing spot of reason.
Okay. So we've established, at least through the logic presented in the text, that a creator is the most rational explanation. We have the Bedouin's intuition and we have the logic of complexity. But this is where the text really pivots. It doesn't just stop at a creator exists. It asks, but who is he? What are his attributes? What is he like? And this brings us to the third section of our outline today, and honestly my favorite part, the linguistic deep dive.
This is where the text brilliantly bridges that gap between general theism, the belief in some kind of creator, and a more specific, detailed theology.
And it does this by comparing two names that are found in the source material, Al-Khaliq and Al-Khalaq. Now, to a regular English speaker, or maybe even someone who speaks conversational Arabic, these might sound like they're basically synonyms. They both get translated as the creator.
They do. But in classical Arabic, the grammar of the language tells a completely different, much deeper, and much richer story. Arabic is a language of roots and patterns. A tiny, subtle change in the pattern of a word can completely change the intensity and the dimension of the meaning.
So let's break that down. The text starts with the root word itself, khalq, which means creation.
Yes, and it points out that the root itself implies something very specific. It implies measuring or determining before the act of creation. The Arabic term is at-takir.
At-takir. That sounds like it involves planning, forethought.
It is exactly that. It implies calculation, design. Before you build a house, you need a blueprint. You need measurements. You need a plan. So khalq isn't just a haphazard, poof, here's a thing. It involves designing and inventing something without any prior model. And that's a key point the text makes, inventing from scratch, not just copying or assembling pre-existing parts.
Okay, so that's the base concept, planned, original creation. Now, tell me about the first name derived from that root, Al-Khaliq.
Al-Khaliq is the standard active participle form. It simply identifies the doer of the action. He is the creator, the one who brought things from non-existence into existence. It establishes the basic fact of creation. He is the one who did it.
Okay, so that's the clockmaker idea we sometimes hear about, right?
Yeah.
He built the clock. He is the builder. It's a title.
Essentially, yes. And if you stop there with just that name, you might get the idea of a god who created the universe at the Big Bang and then, step back to watch it run. A god who is distant, a first cause in the past. But the text urges us to look at the other name, Al-Khaliq.
Al-Khalaq. You can hear that extra stress in the middle of the word, khalaq.
Right. And in Arabic grammar, that specific pattern, the doubling of the middle consonant, has a name. It's called Siyat al-Mubalagha.
Siyat al-Mubalagha. Okay, what does that translate to?
It translates roughly as the intensive form or the exaggerated form. But we have to be really careful with that word exaggerated. It doesn't mean exaggeration in the sense of a lie or making something seem bigger than it is. It means intensification. It indicates immense abundance, constant frequency, and supreme quality.
So it's like adding est to an adjective in English, but much more powerful. Not just a great creator, but the greatest, most active creator.
Exactly. And the text breaks down the meaning of this intensive form, Al-Khaliq, into three specific dimensions. And this is really where the aha moment happens for most people. What's the first dimension?
Okay, so the first dimension the book identifies is quantity.
Explain that.
Al-Khaliq implies that he creates vast, almost uncountable numbers of things. He didn't just create one star. He created billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars. He didn't just create one human. He's created billions upon billions of distinct individuals, each unique. The sheer volume of creation is embedded in the grammar of that name.
So he is the abundant creator. Got it. What's the second dimension?
The second dimension is variety. He creates incredibly diverse types of things. He doesn't just photocopy the same creation over and over again.
So it's not like a factory production line just churning out identical widgets.
Not at all. I mean, just think about the millions of known species of insects. The fact that no two snowflakes are supposedly identical. The insane difference between a blue whale and a bacterium, or a rock on Earth and a gas giant like Jupiter. Al-Khaliq implies an endless, inexhaustible creativity in the types of existence he brings about. He is not limited to a single model or pattern.
That makes perfect sense. If he just made a trillion identical grains of sand, he might be abundant in quantity, but not in variety. So Al-Khaliq covers both.
Hmm.
But you said there was a third dimension.
There is. And this is the one that is, I think, the most profound for how you experience your daily life. The third dimension is continuity.
Continuity.
Yes. Al-Khaliq means he creates constantly at every single moment.
Okay, now that is the game changer.
It is, because it completely dismantles that deist idea. The clockmaker god who created the universe wound it up and then just walked away to let it run on its own. Al-Khaliq means creation is an ongoing, active process that is happening right now, this very second.
So unpack that for me, because we tend to think of creation as a singular event that happened in the beginning.
Well, the text argues that creation is happening now. The cells in my body that are dividing as we speak, that is a present tense act of creation. Stars that are forming right now in the Orion Nebula, that is Al-Khaliq at work. A baby developing in the womb, moment by moment. That is Al-Khaliq. Creation wasn't a one-time event that happened in the distant past. It is the dynamic state of reality itself.
So the creator isn't, for lack of a better word, retired.
Far from it. The text implies that if this active, continuous creation, the sustaining power, were to stop for even a nanosecond, existence as we know it would simply collapse into nothingness. The sustainability of the entire universe is tied to this divine attribute of being Al-Khaliq. He is actively creating the conditions for existence at every microsecond.
Wow, I really love that. It takes what could be a dry grammar lesson, active participle versus the intensive form, and it transforms it into a profound spiritual realization.
It does. It makes the creator feel incredibly present and active. It means that the very fact that you and I are breathing right now is an active, ongoing, creative decision by Al-Khaliq.
And that's precisely the goal of the text. To show how language, when you look closely, reveals a deeper theology. It's meant to create a sense of immediate dependency and really a sense of gratitude.
Well, speaking of active creation and the things happening inside us right now, let's zoom in. We've looked at the desert, we've looked at the dictionary. Now the text wants us to pick up a microscope. This brings us to section 4, the biological miracle.
And specifically, the miracle of the human being. The text pivots from the general to the intensely personal.
And the author uses an analogy here that I think every computer nerd, every coder, every book lover listening to this will immediately appreciate. It's the analogy of the library in the cell.
It's an incredibly powerful image for our information age. The text begins discussing the genetic code, our DNA. And it makes the point that within the microscopic nucleus of a single one of your cells, something you cannot even see with the naked eye, there exists a massive, staggering repository of information.
And the source is specific about the scale. It mentions that if you were to print out, in plain language, the information contained in the DNA of a single human cell, it would fill thousands of volumes.
Just stop and think about the data density there. We are so proud of our terabyte hard drives and our cloud storage, but biological data storage is on an entirely different level of sophistication and miniaturization.
So how does the text connect this back to the creator?
It argues that this is the ultimate modern proof of Al-Khaliq, because information, especially complex functional code, does not arise from chaos. Ink spilled on a page doesn't accidentally write a dictionary. A random string of ones and zeros doesn't accidentally become a functioning operating system. And a random soup of chemicals in a muddy pond doesn't accidentally write a genetic code capable of building a human being.
So code implies a coder. Information implies an informer.
It's the complexity argument again, but on a micro-informational scale. And it connects directly back to that concept we discussed earlier at Tech Year, that idea of measuring, planning, and determining. Well, the text discusses embryological development. It cites verses from the Quran that describe the stages of human creation, from dust to a drop of fluid to a clinging clot and so on.
And the fundamental question there is, how do all those cells know what to do?
Exactly. You start as a single fertilized cell, then it divides again. At the very beginning, they are stem cells. They have the potential to become anything. But at some point, a switch flips. Some cells get the message, okay, you are going to become an eyeball. And other cells get the message, you're going to be a bone in the left pinky finger, and others, you're going to be a neuron in the prefrontal cortex.
But who or what is sending the message? An individual cell doesn't have a brain. It's just a tiny biological machine.
The text attributes this incredibly complex internal direction, this guidance, to the creator's takir. It's a pre-programmed, pre-measured, predetermined path embedded in the code. The argument is that blind, unintelligent matter cannot guide itself to such complex and specific ends. It must be guided.
It really is amazing when you stop to think about it. We just walk around feeling like we're here, like our existence is normal. But inside every one of us, there is this incredibly complex, perfectly scripted biological dance happening 24/7, and we aren't even consciously running the show.
And the text wants to remind us of that fact. You didn't design yourself. You don't even consciously control your own biology for the most part. You can't tell your liver to process toxins faster. You can't command your heart to beat. It all works according to a design that is completely external to your own will.
Which, by extension, implies that the designer is someone else.
Precisely. And that realization, the text argues, should be humbling. It's a reminder that for all of our human arrogance and achievement, we are fundamentally masterpieces of engineering that we clearly did not and could not engineer ourselves.
Okay, so from the incredibly small, let's zoom back out, way, way out, from the microscope to the telescope. This takes us to section 5, the cosmological miracle.
The text invites us, just as the Bedouin did, to look up at the sky as Sama.
And it brings up a phrase that is so poetic and powerful. Pillars without pillars.
Yes, that's a reference to a verse in Surah Luqman. The text notes that the heavens are raised without any pillars that you can see.
Now, think about that from the perspective of an ancient observer. This is a profound miracle. Every roof needs pillars. If you build a tent, you need a central pole. If you build a grand temple, you need massive stone columns. The sky is the biggest roof of all, yet it just hangs there, unsupported.
What's amazing is that for a modern observer, it's still a miracle. We just describe it with different words. We talk about the delicate balance between gravity, centrifugal force, orbital mechanics. But the text would argue, who set the universal constant for gravity? Who balanced those forces so precisely that the roof doesn't all come crashing down on us?
It's the fine-tuning argument again. If gravity were just a tiny fraction stronger, the universe would have collapsed back on itself. If it were a tiny fraction weaker, galaxies and stars would never have formed.
The invisible pillars are the fundamental laws of physics themselves, which the text argues are actively sustained by the Creator. The very fact that the sky doesn't fall is an act of ongoing maintenance of those laws, connecting back to the idea of Al-Khaliq.
The text also brings back the constellations, the buruj that the Bedouin mentioned in his initial argument.
It does, and it highlights their dual function. They aren't just a random scattering of lights. The text mentions that for millennia they served as navigational aids, a source of guidance in the darkness of the desert and the open sea. And, it also points out, they are objects of immense beauty.
Objects of beauty. I really like that the text doesn't just focus on the functional aspect.
And this touches on a really interesting philosophical point. The universe is not just functional, it is also aesthetic.
That's a great distinction. I mean, a car engine is functional, but it's usually ugly and greasy. A factory is functional, but it's often a brutalist concrete box. The universe is a machine that works perfectly, but it's art.
And the text argues that this beauty, this aesthetic quality, is a deliberate attribute of creation. It was made to be gazed at, to inspire awe. A sunset doesn't need to be painted with brilliant oranges and purples for the earth to rotate. But it is.
And speaking of gazing and looking, there is a direct challenge issued in the text. It's a challenge to find a single flaw.
This is a powerful passage from Surah Al-Mulk. The text quotes the verse, which essentially says, "Look at the creation of the most merciful. Do you see any rifts, any flaws? Then look again and again."
That is a remarkably daring challenge. It's like a master craftsman saying, "Go ahead, put my work under a microscope. I dare you to find a single crack in it."
And the text describes this process as a cycle of verification. It says that the gaze your sight returns to you humble and weary. The meaning is that no matter how hard you look, no matter what instruments you use, from the subatomic to the galactic, you don't find structural failure. You find consistent, unbreakable order.
So even something that we might perceive as chaos, like a supernova explosion, is actually following the laws of physics with absolute precision. It's not the system breaking, it's just a different, violent part of the system cycle.
Exactly. The flawlessness being discussed isn't a claim that things don't break or die on an individual level. It's that the underlying system governing them is perfect and consistent. Gravity doesn't take a day off. The laws of thermodynamics don't make a mistake.
The text also doesn't just look up, it looks down. It talks about the Earth itself, the bed that we live on.
Yes, it describes the Earth as being spread out and, crucially, stabilized. It highlights the concept of firm mountains, using the Arabic word rawasi. And the text presents these mountains not just as big bumps on the ground, but as geologic stabilizers, like pegs driven into the ground to hold a tent firm.
That's a fascinating image, like the wheel weights on a car tire, maybe? to keep the rotation smooth and balanced?
That's a very fitting modern analogy. The text emphasizes that the Earth is stabilized in this way so that it does not shake with its inhabitants.
And that's something we take completely for granted. We're on a planet that's spinning at about 1,000 miles an hour while orbiting the sun at 67,000 miles an hour, hurtling through the galaxy. And yet we can stand perfectly still and balance a coin on a table.
And the text wants the reader to stop and feel a sense of profound gratitude for that stability. It's not accidental. It's an engineered feature for your comfort and for civilization to even be possible. If the Earth was constantly shaking and unstable, none of this would exist.
So we've gathered all this evidence. We have the camel tracks of the Bedouin, the exploding printing press, the DNA library in our cells, the linguistic depth of the creator's names, the flawless sky. This brings us to the final part of the discussion, Section 6. Integration and the purpose of knowledge. What does the text say we are supposed to do with all of this information?
This is such a crucial point. Because knowledge, for the sake of knowledge, is just trivia.
Yeah.
You can win a quiz show, but does it actually change your life?
Exactly. I can learn all the parts of a car engine, but if I never actually get in the car and drive it somewhere, what's the point?
So the source material takes a very strong and, I think, very beautiful stance here. Science and faith are not enemies. They're not even separate domains. In fact, observation of the natural world is presented as the primary tool to reach a state of faith.
And it mentions a specific type of person who does this, right? The Ulu Albab.
Yes. That phrase is often translated as the people of understanding or the people of intellect. And the text references a verse from Surah Ali Imran, which defines these deep thinkers not just as people who are, say, praying in a sanctuary, but as those who actively contemplate the creation of the heavens and the earth.
So in this framework, a biologist studying mitochondrial DNA, or an astronomer mapping dark matter, or a geologist studying mountain formation, that is actually an act of worship.
In this worldview, absolutely yes. If you see the entire universe as a sign pointing to the Creator, then studying that universe is, in effect, studying the Creator's handiwork. It's a way to get to know Him. The laboratory becomes a sanctuary. The telescope becomes an altar. Science becomes a deeply spiritual pursuit.
And what is the result of that contemplation? When these people of understanding look at the universe and think deeply about it, what's the output of that equation?
The output isn't a new formula or a dry academic paper. It's an emotional and spiritual reaction. The text says the inevitable result of this deep contemplation is this statement. Our Lord, you did not create all of this in vain. Glory be to you, Sopanak.
You did not create this in vain. That implies purpose. Meaning.
It connects all the complexity we discussed, the printing press that didn't explode, the library and the cell to meaning. If the universe is not a random accident, then it must have a purpose. And if the universe has a purpose...
Then I have a purpose within it.
Precisely. That is the heavy hitter right there. That's the conclusion it all builds toward. It transitions the learner from a state of purely intellectual acknowledgement, okay, logically a God probably exists, to a state of profound spiritual awe. Wow. This is majestic, it has a purpose, and I am a part of it.
It's the connection between the head and the heart.
That is the ultimate goal of Mahmoud Hussain Awad's book, as I read it.
Yeah.
To use the tools of the intellect to unlock the potential of the heart. Recognition leads to reverence.
It's a really beautiful integration. So let's try to wrap this up. We have covered a huge amount of ground today.
We really have. We've traveled from the desert sands all the way to the genetic code and out to the edge of the cosmos.
We started with the Bedouin's logic, that simple intuition. The dung indicates the camel. The message being, don't overthink the obvious. Trust your eyes and your reason.
Then we moved to the exploding printing press. The argument from complexity, the idea that order and information do not spontaneously arise from chaos. The universe is a book written by an author, not a random collection of typos.
Then we did our deep dive into the linguistics, Al-Khaliq versus Al-Khalaq, and that was the big aha moment for me. The creator isn't just a one-time builder in the past. He is the constant, abundant, and varied sustainer of every single moment. He is creating now.
We looked inside the cell, at the library of DNA. We marveled at the internal guidance system that tells an eye how to be an eye, a process we still don't fully understand.
And finally, we looked up at the sky, the pillars without pillars, the flawless system, the direct challenge to find a flaw in the grand design.
And it all points to one single conclusion: recognition, taraf, the act of getting to know the one who made it all.
You know, working through this text, it really does change how you look at the world around you. The book calls the universe a visible book.
And it compares that to Scripture, which it calls the read book.
Yeah.
The idea is that they mirror each other. They're two parts of the same library.
Right. So the text leaves you with this kind of implicit challenge. The next time you're out and you see a footprint in the sand, or a simple star in the night sky,
Or even just the network of veins on the back of your own hand.
don't just see an object. Don't just see physics or biology in action. Try to see a signature.
See the sign, the ayah.
And then maybe ask yourself the question that the people of understanding ask. If none of this was created in vain, then what am I here for?
And that is the question to leave our listeners with.
That's it for this deep dive into Get to Know the Creator by Mahmoud Hussein Awad. Thanks for listening, and keep looking up.
And looking in.
We'll catch you next time.